mean, settlement is where actually a trade stops being a story, right? And it actually starts becoming a fact. And we all know that facts are unforgiving, right? Most people, generally underestimate post-trade risks because capital markets typically end up rewarding on how fast these are done and don't really focus on how well they get completed, right? We all know people spend millions of dollars on front office and hence front office success is visible. While these settlement failures, which actually account for a lot, quietly accumulate in the background, right? There's enough data to back this up, right? Even with low settlement fail rates, in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and some estimates even reach up to a couple of billions, they're trapped and they get issues with liquidity, manual touch points, funding drags. A lot of the regulators across the globe have, responded with very, very harsh penalties like daily cash payouts, mandatory buy-ins, and fines running into hundreds and millions of dollars, right? We have a case in point, and I'm sure everybody is very keenly aware of what happened to Barings Bank, and they didn't collapse because the trades are badly executed. They collapsed because the back office didn't really work. They weren't settled, they weren't reconciled, and the right escalation wasn't done at the right point, which allowed the losses to outrun the market cap of the bank itself, more than twice its available capital. This risk is extremely dangerous because it's routine, right? It's a boring risk until it actually isn't. And that's why when it fails, nothing else actually matters. I think this is a big mindset challenge that kind of needs to evolve, right? And in our experience, there are firms that still treat some of these settlement penalties like small parking fines. They're annoying, they're predictable, and they get kind of covered in your budget. So that's a very, very dangerous illusion and path to follow, right? As I mentioned in the previous question, some of the regulators are kicking in and there are a lot of different penalties that are getting applied, right? What may seem as a small cost, which you can, afford to repeat as a big or a medium tier institution, quickly snowballs into millions of dollars in losses, right? Just not the monetary value, but you lose reputation and supervisory intervention kicks in and you're treading underwater. Again, referring to what happened at Barings, it didn't collapse with just the one trade, right? It collapsed on thousands of these trades happening at the same time when nobody was monitoring and managing all of this, right? In today's scenario, in every robust, developed modern market and some of the developing markets as well, under the T+1 settlement and heavy oversight by the regulator with punitive penalties coming into place, it's an open invitation for systematic and organization failure repeatedly. I've had this question come to me from lot of different facets. People who know what I do, people who don't know what I do. But great post-trade is dull, it's boring, it's repetitive. And that's exactly the point, right? In practice, trades should match in seconds and nanoseconds and minutes, not hours. And exceptions surface immediately. Issues are escalated automatically. And you don't wait for month-end reconciliation, right? This is a clear segregation of duty, very, very clean audit trails, and no reliance on heroics, spreadsheets, and effectively, to an extent, manual intervention. If you think this sounds really dramatic, manual, or dependent on people sitting till midnight, 1 a.m., cleaning, reconciling, resubmitting, that's really not healthy. It's really not good at all. A good post-trade service or an offering or a system or just the mechanics of how you run your post-trade business, it should be invisible, predictable, and fully controlled, under the radar and operating at 100% at any given point in time. I love poking the bear, and I think it's when I do sit down and have these extended discussions and try and understand some of the challenges our partners in the financial services industry face, I ask 3 very, very uncomfortable questions, right? What happened when the trade didn't settle, right? When did you find out? How fast did you find out? And how long did you take to find out? If an exception kicked in at 4 o'clock, How quickly did you resolve it? Who did it get escalated to? Or was there a big hullabaloo within the organization? Or it just rolled over overnight and you figured it out in the morning? Everybody wants to grow your business, right? And that's why we're here. And if volumes double tomorrow under T+1 and some of the new regimes, what do you think is going to break first? Your system or your people, or both together, right? If you really don't have these answers and they're not backed by enough data, by enough operational knowledge, this risk to your organization today isn't really theoretical. It's already sitting in your back office, and failure at some point is quite imminent. Like I said earlier, and I alluded to the fact that post-trade efficiency is boring, right? And Nova is centered around the concept of exception management. So we stop, we analyze, we watch, and we're working always in the background. So silent failures are made visible at a very, very early stage. And pretty much anything on the settlement cycle, from issues to failures to repetitive trades to fat finger checks, become impossible to hide, right? We've seen that in the past, crises arise and escalated because some of these mismatches sat unnoticed in error accounts and funding accounts for days, months. And Nova changes that by doing all of this pretty much in real time with a lot of automation built in. And by working with organizations to create automatic structures around helping them classify exceptions. And obviously, then working with them to maintain robust SLAs and routing them with a very, very clear ownership. We don't believe in the concept of rollovers. Every action's logged, every override is auditable, and the duty segregation is enforced by design. There is no exception to this case. So it's not just a one-person job here. It's a series of people, series of processes, and a high degree of automation built on top of that to ensure that this doesn't happen. Right? The result is very, very simple, very, very straightforward, and the ROI seem fairly straightforward. Errors surface in seconds, not minutes, not months, not weeks, not days. Corrective action is taken immediately and not under pressure. And these small breaks never ever become system failures. Organizations don't fail because they are complex. Trades don't fail because they're complex. Organizations fail because they ignore the simplicity of the solution, and trades fail because they're ignored after execution. Single message is very, very clearly this. It's not just a hygiene problem. It's not just a back office problem. It's also managing and controlling the risk that you expose yourself to. Every major market failure, and historically I can say this, started with a small, manageable settlement issue that was never really fixed. And even if it was fixed at that point in time, that process was never corrected. Right? So you're building a case for yourself to let this happen again and again and again, like a parking fine, as I mentioned before. If you control your processes, you control your settlement, you control the risk. If you don't, history will eventually come and collect its debt.